in there. All right, so if you can find your seats as quickly as possible, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning. Welcome to all of you. I am Rachel Hayes. I'm the interim dean of the David Eccles School of Business. It's a pleasure to join all of you here in celebration of our 31st annual Spencer Fox Eccles Convocation. A warm welcome to everyone who's joining us live and to those of you who are joining us via the live stream. I want to extend a special welcome to our guest speaker, Blake Murray. Blake, your business acumen, leadership, and distinguished career make you a perfect convocation speaker. Each year, we gather on this occasion to honor Spence Eccles for the vital role he played working with his aunt, Emma Eccles Jones, to establish a $15 million endowment that has benefited this school since 1991. That generous gift and the naming of the school pay tribute to Mrs. Jones' father and Spence's grandfather, David Eccles, one of the leading figures in the economic growth of both the state of Utah and the Pacific Northwest at the turn of the century. This endowment gift has provided more than $23 million supporting innovative programs, scholarship, and faculty awards. We thank the trustees of the Emma Eccles Jones Foundation who are here with us today, including Spencer F. Eccles, Katie Eccles, and Robert Hatch. And we also want to acknowledge the other Eccles family members who are here, including Lisa Eccles and Hope Eccles. I'm now pleased to turn the time over to the University of Utah president, Taylor Randall.
Boy, it's good to be back at the Eccles School after a few weeks in a different office. Thank you, Rachel, for that introduction. This is a wonderful annual event where we get to celebrate Spencer Fox Eccles and the naming of our school, and it's going to be a thrill to hear from you, Blake. We're excited about hearing your entrepreneurial story and its ups and downs and fortunately successes as well. It's my pleasure to introduce to you the grandson of a namesake of our school, David Eccles, Mr. Spencer Fox Eccles. He's really a man who needs very little introduction, and so I've cut it actually down this year. But suffice it to say, at 87 years old, he continues to give 110%, as manifest by a $110 million donation that was given to name our medical school. So thank you very, very much. We have been doing some research. Is that right? Well, so not that I can do math in my head, nor do I like to do math in my head in public, but that means that's probably a lot more. I think we are. I'm going to go out on a limb. We've been trying to do this research. We are probably the only business school and medical school to have been endowed by the same family. So thanks to the entire Eccles family for such incredible support. And now it is my pleasure to turn the time over to a man who ensures me that yes, the best is yet to come, Mr. Spencer Fox Eccles.
Well, good morning, fellow Utes. Oh, well, that's wonderful. Hope the check's cleared. I'm going to move this over just a tad here. Well, thank you, Dean Hayes. and President Randall. I'm thrilled, as always, to be here to participate in this, the 31st Annual Spencer Fox Eccles Convocation, since Dean Seabolt set this up, Dean of this business school 31 years ago. Each year at this event, I reflect on the accomplishments of my grandfather, David Eccles, and the generosity and foresight of my Aunt Emma Eccles Jones, who established an endowment in 1991 in his honor and memory that continues to enrich the business school today, as you heard. I believe they both would be proud of our work upon here, educating and mentoring and shaping the future of thousands of today's students and tomorrow's business leaders. At this annual event, we celebrate David Eccles' legacy, his entrepreneurial spirit, his integrity, his character, his business savvy, and tremendous work ethic. An extreme example of our family has used for years, the example of sharing back his enormous business successes with his community. And we do that by hearing from outstanding other business leaders who share some of those same attributes. You know, in the years past, we've heard from extraordinary business leaders, Bill Marriott, Gail Miller, David Rusenstein, and John Warnick, to name a few. And yes, today we're honored to add to that list our 2021 Convocation speakers, Blake Murray. But before I introduce Blake, we have a very special announcement this morning, one that we just got put together, and I'm privileged to be one of the ones chosen to share it with all of you.
You always told me I should listen to what you say.
Oh. Well, I always say, can you hear me? And then I ask them, do you want to? And then that's the... Well, before I was so momentarily interrupted, and to do so, I would like to ask President Taylor to join me here at the podium. Right over yonder. Right over yonder, within reach. President Randall, I have here in my hand a copy of a proclamation from some of your closest friends and longtime supporters. The outlines in some detail your extraordinary accomplishments as Dean of the Business School and in recognition for becoming the 17th president of the University of Utah. Well, I wish I could read the entire proclamation to you at this time. Time doesn't allow it, but let me just share a few of the highlights of your tenure mentioned here, such as your vital role in the growth of this school more than five-fold, to elevating the school's national rankings, including 8 programs now in the top 25, and overseeing the funding, design, and construction of 3 major campus buildings for the school, while creating significant scholarship programs for business students, including the important first-generation students, and of course, carrying on the Randall family tradition of service to this school, where your grandfather was once dean and your father chaired the accounting department and was my professor in 1952. Tough grader, I might say. I survived it, but I never could get that double entry accounting business down. I couldn't figure it out. Why do it twice when once is plenty? But given all that, I'm pleased to read to you the concluding statements of the proclamation, which says to the following: whereas, in recognition of Taylor Randall's accomplishments as Dean of the David Eccles School of Business, a small group of his closest friends and most generous supporters have come together to fund and establish in his honor the Taylor R. Randall $1.5 million presidential endowed share in the David Eccles School of Business. do you think about that? Don't go away. Where was he? Did the check clear? No, let's see. Oh, yeah. Now, therefore, we establish this chair in your name in order to benefit the school, its faculty, students, alumni, and the wider community in perpetuity, furthering its momentum in preparing students to be the business leaders of tomorrow. This then lists all those who have contributed to this chair, including major gifts from the George S. and Dolores Eccles Foundation, Brent and Bonnie Jean Beasley, Kurt and Elisa Doman, Gregory Goff, Clark and Christine Ivory, Kurt Larson, Greg Miller family, Richard Marriott, Jim and Christy Sorensen, Steve and Jonna Smith, and 30 additional gifts from others. Taylor, congratulations on this significant honor, and I'm pleased to present this proclamation to you and to look forward to outstanding faculty member holding this chair and being inspired by your dedication and your innovation, your energy, and of course, your vision, ensuring that, yes, for this school, the best is yet to come. Congratulations. All in a day's work, huh? Nothing to it. Well, now it's my privilege to introduce Blake Murray, CEO and co-founder of Divvy, a financial technology company here in Draper, Utah, Silicon Slopes. A divvy, a word I've used since I was a boy, as a matter of fact. While he started the company just 5 years ago, it has already been acquired by Bill.com for $2.5 billion. Wow. Yes, indeed. I'm told that Divvy is now one of the fastest growing financial technology companies in the country, successfully providing a system utilized by many, many more than the announced 7,000 businesses, which include Georgetown University, Habitat for Humanity, and WordPress, to mention a few. Interestingly, it was Blake's first-hand experience as an investor in the restaurant group, if you will, including the archaic, time-consuming process of managing multiple restaurants' finances and expense reports, that inspired him to create Divvy. And that was true inspiration. Now, Divvy is the leading platform used by thousands of businesses to control company-wide spending, eliminating expense reports and retroactive reimbursements that really bog things down. While he was born in California and raised in Seattle, I'm thrilled to say that today Blake is a Utah man who earned his bachelor's degree right here at the University of Utah, where he serves on the David Eccles School of Business Financial Technology Advisory Board. He also serves on the board of the Waterford School in Sandy, Utah, and enjoys fly fishing and spending some time with his wife and children and dogs. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm Utah welcome to Blake Murray and Divvy.
Let me get situated here for a second. So first, even before I get into this, thank you. Like, what an incredible honor. And I'm full of gratitude. And it was fun as I was sitting up here, just saying hi to a few people and friendly faces. The biggest and best surprise was seeing my sweet boy, Henry, my oldest son, walk through the doors. What a fun surprise and what a fun experience, especially after 5 years. And I'll get into this, actually. After 5 years of incredible grind and, frankly, sacrifices of time away from my kids and my wife, to have my wife, Tiana, and my sweet boy, Henry, here means a lot. That's really, really fun for me. I don't often get to mix work with family, and so that's cool. Thanks to the Eccles family and to Spence. We had a really fun morning, starting with a breakfast, and then got to spend some time with students answering questions. But what a legacy that they have built. And I'll actually talk about that, and again, still off script here, but about legacy and what it means to me, because legacy can take on a few interpretations. And for some reason, it oftentimes takes on a negative connotation, which I don't understand. But the legacy that the Eccles family has laid out for all of us by leading from the front in their example of selfless service and of incredible business acumen and then philanthropy is something that all of us can and should lean into heavily. So thank you very much to Spence, to Hope, to Katie, and to Lisa as well. I've appreciated spending time with you and getting to know you. So good morning. It's fun to be here. It's an honor and a privilege to address you all today. Over the past several months, when I was asked to give this speech, I had some time. And really how my brain works, when I'm given an assignment, and kind of more generally, I'm a process-oriented individual, I get into research mode. And so that's what I did. I got into research mode when they reached out to me and asked me to, come up with a topic. And my objective of that time, because here we are in a room, we all have different interests, we all have different objectives, and all of us think and behave differently. That's tough. That's tough to come up with something that's going to resonate and can land with an audience, across the 20 or so minutes that I'm going to speak. And more often than not, I think that these convocation or commencement speeches, which research mode was studying a ton of them. I just went and watched a ton, from different universities and certainly those that came before me here. But typically they end up being like, do these 10 things and you'll be successful. And that's tough because success, satisfaction, a joy in life, it's not formulaic, and I'm a firm believer in that, of kind of that calculus or the equation that yields an outcome of success, joy, satisfaction is empirically different for every single one of us. And so I couldn't do that. Even, doing the research and trying to get in the weeds and study those that have been there, done that, I couldn't give a list. And I think what you'll learn pretty quickly is I do generally have a lot to say. It's not that I like the sound of my voice, but I have strong opinions. And I wanted to give a speech, truly, on entrepreneurship, on capital allocation, on fundraising, on startups, on the broader ecosystem of fintech, of becoming an entrepreneur or a student, and I couldn't land on that at all. And so ultimately what I landed on, which sounds like the biggest softball of all time, but I promise you it'll start to make sense as we get through this, is what I call joy in the journey. So here's how it's going to go. I'm going to touch on 5 points today. And the first is starting with the end. I can't even see this in front of me. I'm short. I don't have line of sight down onto the screen. Okay, so number 1 is starting with the end. Number 2 is understanding trade-offs, okay? Number 3 is grit is good. Number 4 makes absolutely no sense right now, but I promise you it will make sense as we get to it. Taylor and I have actually talked about this one before, and it's a phrase that is common in my family called "it's just a gyoza." And the last one is failure is greater than success. Okay, so now there's so much information that's readily available that perhaps the most thing that I can offer today is nothing that I can necessarily say to you, but it's to offer my time. And this is a genuine, real, legitimate offer that I want to make to you. So to the extent that you need career advice, maybe it's help negotiating a deal, fundraising, if it's formulating your own business plan, startup, I don't care. Perhaps it's even career advice, trying to answer the questions of like, what path should I be on? Each one of those, again, is so individual and unique that I want to spend time with you, and I can spend time with you. So please reach out to me. My email is blake@getdivvy.com, and I'm a texter, so there's my number. I'll probably let it go to voicemail if you give me a call, but if you give me a text, tell me who you are, right? Reference this, that you listen to me here. we'll go to battle. Like I'll have you come to the office, or I'll come to where you are. We'll do a Zoom, whatever you're comfortable with, and we'll start to whiteboard, brainstorm out the ideas, and hopefully with the outcome that I can help you prevent some of the mistakes that potentially that I made in my past. But on the other side, hopefully I can offer you some clarity, right? And perhaps some good judgment on the path that you're trying to embark on. So please take me up on this though, okay? Because I have some time to work with you, and that would be an absolute thrill and privilege to work with each one of you. I think the more getting into the message, really the most important thing that I can impart on you today, after working with thousands of people and having countless meetings and conversations about who they are and what they're trying to accomplish, and delving deeply into their careers, is really simple, is that you can be the architect of your own future and your career. Another really vague statement, but let's get into how to solve for that. So, starting with the end, here's how I generally think about it. In order to find joy and satisfaction in the journey, start with the end in mind and work backwards. The reason why this is the first step, when you think about a math equation of order of operations, starting with the end may feel counterintuitive, but it's not. It's the first step that you have to start with. And the reason why is it'll cause you to increase or widen your aperture of how you think about different aspects of your life, right? It forces you to ask the right questions of your life, of really, where do you see yourself when your career is over, rather than focusing a little myopically and frankly arbitrarily on what am I supposed to do when I graduate, right? We've all asked that question before. No, for real, like, what am I supposed to do when I graduate? Real life starts and I have to get out there. That's the wrong question. You should be thinking, where do I see myself when my career is over? So in reality, the process, though, is no different than a normal goal-setting process, but we'll add some tweaks into there. And so I think most of you have probably heard the phrase, and it's kind of like an inspirational quote of, what is it? I don't even lean too heavily. A goal without a plan is just a wish. Okay, so you've heard about that in order to have a goal really makes no sense unless you have a plan that leads to that. But when you start with the end, you're able to work backwards to create that plan or a blueprint. And what that does is it increases the odds of success, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to give yourself a fighting chance to actually succeed in whatever endeavor that you're trying to start. So the other side of it, how does happiness fit into this equation? Well, if your path and outcome is incredibly ambitious, like that's really at your core what you want. You know when you lay down at night that I want to do something big, that's important to me. You will accept with arms wide open the sacrifices and trade-offs that are necessary to achieve that end. You'll recognize that those sacrifices have a necessary purpose instead of purely meaningless drudgery. It's almost as if you're able to make peace with the long, arduous process that you're embarking on before it happens, and then while you're in the thick of it as well. I tell my kids this frequently, but find that this next concept applies to most of us as well, that everything you want is on the other side of hard. Right? Everything you want is on the other side of hard. So I wanted a very specific outcome for my family. Thus, I had to formulate a plan that gave me a high percentage shot at achieving that outcome. Others will perhaps have a simpler vision of where they want to end up, which will require less rigor and offer more flexibility on how to achieve their goal. But here's the big however. They still need to make consistent decisions that put them on a path to their outcome. And I would suggest that most of us struggle to answer, especially as 22 to 30-year-olds in that range, what should I do with my life or where should I work, but could easily answer the better question of where do you see yourself 20 to 30 years from now, because that's built into you. That general dreamy thinking of who do I want to become? Where do I actually see myself? That's what, when you fall asleep at night, where your mind naturally wanders as you contemplate the type of person you want to become, and the lifestyle you hope to achieve. This isn't, I'm good at writing, so I guess I should try to be a copywriter. This is, this got formatted poorly. Really what that was a picture was, and you can see the date, May 5th, 2013, okay? So a number of years ago. That was my family, Tiana, my sweet wife, my 3 kids, Henry, Bentley, and Ruby. We went to visit my parents on their farm in Redmond, Washington. And farm is a very kind way to think about it. It's just stunning. It's gorgeous. And the lifestyle that we were afforded in living there was just something that obviously, as you can see now shifting to the text, spring on the farm, loved growing up there. Hopefully, I'll be able to provide my family with a similar upbringing. That vague statement is literally what I'm talking about. It is the simple dream, again, that it's in the middle of an experience when you're going to sleep at night. Man, it would be great if I could do that. That's where I want to be 20 to 30 years from now. And that was my aspirational outcome that I wanted to achieve. And you can see it in a dang Instagram post 9 years ago. Hopefully, I'll be able to provide my family with a similar upbringing. Well, if I wanted that upbringing, I knew that it was going to entail a material element of grit and pain to get there. When you start with the end in mind and work backwards to align your career choices with what it functionally takes to pull it off, the grind doesn't feel like a grind. The sacrifices feel like growth opportunities and don't cause you to become embittered as you clearly see their need in helping you execute against your broader vision. That right there is clarity and perspective. So to repeat myself and condense the thought a little bit, satisfaction in your career is directly linked to having a clear understanding of what it takes to achieve what you want in your life. But here's the big problem, right? There's always a but, and here's the but. We're all capable of clearly identifying that future self, but I believe we are quick to allow outside influences to mess with our barometer of success and satisfaction. We lose sight of who we want to become and start measuring ourselves against others and what they've accomplished, which frankly may or may not be consistent with our wishes or that desired outcome. We start asking the wrong question of, am I successful? When we should be asking, no, am I progressing towards my goal and my outcome? And I've observed that we tend to allow false narratives to pollute and skew our thinking, how we think about our careers, how we think about our progress, our lives, and ultimately our self-worth. Binary narratives create a false dichotomy of right versus wrong, such as work smarter versus work harder, bootstrap business versus venture-backed businesses, you're a fool for getting an MBA versus you're an idiot for not getting an MBA, the 100-hour work week versus the 4-day work week. From my position, I see the broader Silicon Slopes community get lost in these tired tropes constantly. If you're not careful, you end up optimizing for roles or life choices that have nothing to do with your goal and are likely to send you completely off course. This is all background noise masquerading as thought leadership, and you have to understand that when you come across that type of versus mentality. And of course, the answer to each of those versus scenarios is and, not or. Okay, and I'll explain that. What I mean here is what works for me is likely different from you because we have a different end in mind in the first place. Thus, what is required to achieve that end is empirically different. So, the TLDR here is don't get distracted by the sound bites and stick to your plan. Your 4-day work week is fantastic if it aligns with your goals. I'll stick to my plan, though, because I'm confident that it's leading to where I need to go. Now, I want to talk about a final related point just on this theme, where I often see some pretty significant junior varsity thinking, if I'm going to be honest. A lot of people have fantastically ambitious goals, both professionally and financially, and I love it. I get fired up for them every time I hear about their goals. However, most are poor judges of understanding trade-offs that are related to a given decision that you're making. You will have deep satisfaction in your career when you understand the trade-offs of your career choices and when they align with what you want in your life. So let's quickly talk about a simple principle in a good visual that I call the law of the stick. We'll get into teacher mode here for a second. Let's envision that I'm holding a stick. The stick represents a decision that we make. We make thousands of conscious and unconscious decisions every single day. Some important, but most not, right? They're involuntary. You don't even think about it. You're in default mode, coast mode. You're just making decisions day in and day out. This stick, though, has two ends. The ends represent the trade-offs that occur in making a given decision. Big decisions about where to live, about who we choose to spend our life with, right? From being a spouse, when or even if to have kids, and certainly our careers deserve a hell of a lot of consideration. For example, let's use this now. If I choose to become a teacher, there's the decision we made. On one side of the stick, I have a high chance of being fulfilled in knowing that I'm helping young minds grow and progress. I'll likely have the summers off, so some pretty baller vacations. I'll be able to teach topics that I'm passionate about. I'll be able to be home for dinner with my family, and I'll probably be able to coach a sport or two for my kids as well. On the other side of the stick, and this is where I want to be careful, this isn't a pro-con list, because that's naturally where your mind would go, right? That the other side of the trade-off is a con. No, it's just the pragmatic reality of the trade-offs that you need to evaluate. And in this one specifically, the average salary is going to be somewhere between $45,000, $60,000. Used cars are probably in my future. Vacations are probably road trips, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, holidays a little extravagant. Those are the trade-offs in making that decision of becoming a teacher. Okay, let's talk about a different one. Perhaps then I become an investment banker, totally different career track. My earning potential is 6 or 7 figures annually, Hawaii and Caribbean, I freaking love them, Michelin-starred restaurants, fancy cars, you get it, right? On the flip side, it's a 90-hour work week, and that's like not even part of the grind, right? It just is what it is, a 90-hour work week, little to no social life, no hobbies, very little family time, but then, I can live that lifestyle. You get it. Those are clearly extremes, and both, in illustrating those two extremes, both can be right because they're individual choices solely dependent on what you expect from your life and what will bring you ultimate joy. Architecting your life becomes significantly easier when you are clear about what your expectations are. And I want to reiterate my point here. You will have deep satisfaction in your career when you understand the trade-offs of your career choices and when they align with what you want. Now I want to focus on one of those narratives that I just kind of poked fun of, right? Those versus scenarios. And we're going to focus then on the 100-hour work week versus the 4-day work week. The 100-hour work week often gets criticized as kind of like hustle porn, to use kind of a weird, kind of crass term. But looks attractive, but totally unrealistic. But that certainly is the criticism. And this is speaking to you now from an audience perspective. I'm narrowing the aperture of this message, okay? So follow along. This is speaking to those of you that have specific ambitions to do something big, like capital letters, really big, high impact, asymmetric upside, big in scope, potential generational outcome from a professional perspective and generational outcome from a wealth creation perspective, personally and more systemically, okay? So this is the audience I'm speaking to now. There is simply no substitute at all for hard work. It does not exist at all, ever. The hustle is necessary. The grind is good. It's wonderful, in fact. The concept of work-life balance does not exist when the expectation is asymmetric upside, okay? Connect those two. Don't misunderstand me. Work-life balance does not exist when, this is the asterisk, when the expectation is asymmetric upside. Successful people, by and large, are where they are because of the sacrifices and the time that they put in. Working smarter is not better than working harder because in this scenario, you must do both consistently and obsessively. It's an and, not an or. I do not know a single exceptionally successful individual that wasn't all consumed with their space of study. If your expectation is to do one of those big things that I mentioned, you should also expect significant sacrifices in other aspects of your life. At Divvy, we've spoken ad nauseum, especially in the early days, about our belief that work-life balance is a fallacy when your goal is to achieve greatness. Traditionally, we're trying to achieve balance in 3 pillars, okay? And Utah kind of has a 4th, but 3 pillars: career, family, and personal interests or hobbies, right? Utah, just as a culture, not to speak, overtly, tends to throw religion in there as a 4th pillar as well. Again, I'm speaking to those of you that are going big by design. You will have to sacrifice either your hobbies or your family, and we all know where that should net out. What became clear to me was that I couldn't have it all at once, but I could have it all over time. I embraced that my time and season would be work and family, which left absolutely 0 time for hobbies. This type of thinking typically elicits eye rolls from the peanut gallery, or certainly LinkedIn posts from the armchair quarterbacks, because they try, for some reason, to minimize the value of actual hard work. And for the life of me, I'll never understand that. But let me tell you, they're completely wrong. And for some, that's a very bitter pill to swallow. To attain big outcomes, you must have a myopic focus. And focus is as close to a superpower in business as it gets. Let me repeat that. Focus is as close to a superpower in business as it gets. So I had to be acutely focused on building Divvy, working the classic 12 to 15 hours a day, not turning my brain off for 5 years, sacrificing time away from family in order to achieve my broader professional goals and to achieve our family's financial goals. With whatever leftover time I had, I still tried to be the best husband and father that I could be. But much of that burden fell on the shoulders of my amazing wife, Tiana. Now, to marry two messages together, my expectation for myself, what I wanted for my life, was to build a generational software company with a massive outcome, okay? So there's my end in mind. Because that was my expectation, I knew that a 9-to-5 and traditional work-life balance simply wouldn't work for me, but that at some time, my time in a season would shift focus to my family and other hobbies and personal interests. Phases of life require intense focus. And the good news, because there is good news, there's a light at the end of the tunnel when you're going through that, is that most phases do actually have an endpoint. So that time of season of really, really hyper-intense work for me personally is starting to lessen a bit, which allows me a significantly more time to spend time with my wife and kids. And thankfully, as Spence mentioned, I love fly fishing, so I finally can do a little bit of fly fishing, which is great. Again, to reiterate this point though, I couldn't have it all at once, but I could have it all over time. When I arrived at the University of Utah in 2002, I was absolutely convinced that I would spend my life dedicated to wildlife biology and conservation. That is a really far cry from ultimately what I landed in. But that was my degree in environmental studies, okay? There's a peak right there. There I was in southern Africa. That was when Henry was 9 months old. It was January, what year, Tiana? 2009. 2008? Dang. Yeah. No, it was 2009. January 2009. Yeah, it was 2009. Yeah. 2009, and I found myself away from my family. Okay, but there I was studying elephants in the rugged plains of Africa. And perhaps this is a bit of a kind of a peek into my mind, but it's just who I am. Like, at some point, you just kind of have to accept your own neuroses and who you are, but I love animals. Like, they're just like built into my core, and I love animals, frankly, a little bit more than I love people. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. Anyway, so I received my undergraduate in environmental studies, and it's, again, was a stretch that at some point I would find myself as an entrepreneur and a tech CEO. But as a young freshman, I found myself sitting in my dorm alone at night. My roommate, for some reason, didn't show up for that entire year, so I was in a solo room. And I was staying up late at night. And I remember vividly, I was sitting there emailing. It was, I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but it had to have been over 100 different professors and PhDs, hoping that one of them would give me a shot at becoming their apprentice, right, in whatever field of study in wildlife biology and conservation that they were really focused on. And I was really hoping that one of them would give me a shot. I had absolutely nothing to offer them at all. Zero experience, acumen, outside of like literally reading National Geographic myself and thinking animals were cute. But I had to try, and I wasn't afraid to get rejected. So, the fourth one, the weird one, it's just a gyoza. That lack of fear of rejection was instilled in us by my parents. When I was young, my parents would take our family to eat at an indoor food court featuring foods from all around the world, right? Most of you have probably been to food courts like that. I have an older brother, Nick, who's 4 years older than me. And he loved Japanese gyozas, which are, pot stickers. We got a gyoza there. So the Japanese stand sold gyozas 2 for $1. Okay, that was their program. Nick went about his way, he gobbled up his gyozas, and then he wanted one more, but he was aware that the menu said 2 for $1. So he asked my dad what to do. My dad suggested that he go and ask them if he could just order 1 gyoza for 50 cents. This made him, Nick, extremely, extremely nervous because at that point he'd be seeking an exception to kind of the program or the rule. And on the other side, he was too full to go have 2 more gyozas. So my dad then said to him, dude, Nick, what's the worst that can happen? And Nick then said, they'll say no. My dad said, yeah, that's correct. And then you'll be no worse off than you are now if they say no, but they might say yes, and you have nothing to lose at all. So Nick built up his courage as he was only 7 years old at the time and asked the woman at the counter if he could buy one gyoza for 50 cents. She didn't bat an eye, of course, because it was no big deal, and she said, sure. So she took his 50 cents, Nick had his gyoza, and this began a great tradition in the broader Murray family. When someone is hesitant to do something a bit out of the ordinary, we say, go for it. It's just a gyoza. That statement has ended up literally being transformational to my career. It's just a gyoza. So to connect the dots a little bit more, and this is kind of the tweet, if you will, okay? You will not receive what you don't ask for, and you'll be surprised, blown away, in fact, in my opinion, at how often you get what you want. So you'll be surprised. Well, anyway, yeah, you'll be surprised that you'll get what you want. And so ask for a ton. So it was just a gyoza when I emailed more than 100 professors and PhDs and received more than a dozen responses back, interested in having me become their apprentice, right? I had nothing to lose. I wasn't afraid of hearing the word no. They didn't know me. It was no sweat off my back. More than a dozen of them said, yeah, oh my gosh, you'd be able to spend the summer with me? That's fantastic. It was just a gyoza each time I pitched my business to investors and asked for way more than I deserved. And it was just a gyoza each time I recruited high-performing professionals and executives to leave their storied careers and join me at a no-name startup called Divvy. Last message I want to share about failure and disappointment being absolutely transformational to lasting success. So here's a little about Divvy. We're a software platform, if you're not familiar, for finance teams. Excuse me for a sec. Divvy's pretty cool because it kind of has a few kind of businesses within the business. So we extend capital or a line of credit or other additional forms of capital to businesses, right, where traditionally they would go to a bank to try to get that capital. And then on the other side, right, which is just a hugely important competitive advantage that we have, is that we have this robust, mature, and frankly beautiful software stack. And our pitch to them is you'll never have to build an expense report again, right? Fully automated. You'll have complete control over who spends what, where, when, and why in real time. The software is going to do it all for you. Stop using your old software. And oh, by the way, we'll get you all the money you need to operate your business. And we'll grow as you grow, right? So pretty compelling, big, powerful software. But then the point here, which will lead to the next, is a really big credit portfolio, right? A really big credit portfolio. So Divvy had to do a couple things. We were equal parts high-growth software company, and then on the fly, we had to learn to become asset managers and to manage billions of dollars of credit, which can obviously be an incredibly risky asset to hold. And when do you think that was risky? In March of last year. So, like, Divvy had been this growth story that was just thrilling and fantastic the entire time. From the venture community funding us to hundreds of millions of dollars coming into it. From a revenue growth story, our growth rate has just been exponential year over year. The rate at which we were able to get to more than $100 million of revenue, it was just fun. And it was one of those scenarios where it's just kind of all gone right. And then, like I said, March of 2020 hit, and as the hysteria of COVID was going around the globe, we were faced with really, really terrifying unknowns about how our users would perform, right? Because we'd worked so diligently in building a performant portfolio of assets with strong underwriting principles, and that was something that we prided ourselves around, was kind of the financial services side and the nuts and bolts, or how the sausage is made of the business. That was a huge source of pride, but we had no idea now, right? In the face of all of the relative unknowns at COVID, put yourself back into March of 2020. Nobody had any clue what was going to go on at that point. And we had no idea if were we going to default potentially on billions of dollars, right? And that was absolutely terrifying. So we had to make some decisions. And to ensure the long-term viability and success of Divvy, I made the strategic decision to lay off a significant portion of our go-to-market team, which forced us then to automate those cost centers with strong internal tooling in internal products, right? Take what used to be done by people, cut those costs, and then turn it into a fully automated experience and platform, which then also not only has to become automated and easy to use, it has to figure out how to drive more revenue per customer. It has to accelerate growth, so a huge task in front of us. But letting those people, shifting the focus onto them, letting them go was by far, and it's not even comparable, the worst day of my career. It was, as somebody that is a crier, I get emotional, I love my people, I've invested in them, they've invested in me, I let them down. Like, I don't know how else not to look at it and view it that way. I absolutely let them down because they had given so much time, energy, creativity, kind of the proverbial blood, sweat, and tears to my vision. And then here I was, I had to let them go. And it was something that I struggled with massively. But on the business side, it was clear as day that that was the right strategic move to ensure the long-term viability and success of Divvy. So it hurt me deeply. So now what I want to share with you all is a message that I shared with the company that day. And my hope is that out of everything that I've said, that this is the message that will stick with a few of you, because I think it's kind of the most important thing that I can offer from a career growth perspective. So now quote, okay? I'm reading from this message. I have 3 prevailing personal pillars that guide my life, from which all else stems. They are faith, loyalty, and legacy. Depending on how you look at it, which I touched on earlier, legacy can have a vain interpretation. To me, it means something much softer. Who am I really? Am I kind, hardworking, honest, fair, a problem solver? Maybe I'm a hothead. Patient, inclusive, a friend, creative. Here's what I know from personal experience of being in the depths of sorrow. The good that I have in me is a direct result of the bad I have experienced. Those suffocating moments have a cause and effect relationship. And for me, the effect is deep, long moments of introspection, hard questions of who do I want to be? How do I want to make people feel? Am I fulfilling my purpose and potential? Now, I want to share a story of my wonderful Aunt Jane. She's had trial and tragedy that are of the tsunami proportion. To read this is in Jane's words. I will never forget the summer and fall of 2009. On June 9th, my father died after suffering from dementia for over 10 years. On June 25th, our 22-year-old son died unexpectedly, and less than a month later, so did my cousin. On August 13th, my 82-year-old mother had open heart surgery and began a lengthy recovery. On October 18th, my 41-year-old brother died. On October 31st, my husband had a massive heart attack, my Uncle Morgan, and flatlined for 8 minutes. The firefighters and paramedics brought him back to us. End quote. No one should have to experience what my Aunt Jane and her family experienced. I should add that less than 2 years later, in November of 2011, after that series of tragedies, her 25-year-old son-in-law, who at the time had a 1-year-old daughter and another due in just 2 months, passed away in his sleep over the Thanksgiving break. The tsunami kept on coming. Let me be clear, we do not need to be grateful for tragedies. That's not the message here. They are heartbreaking, they are terrible, but what they can create, if we'll allow it, is not just a better version of ourselves, but the best version of ourselves, and I believe that to my core. Jane's legacy isn't her seemingly endless tragedy, it's who she has become as a result of the tragedy. It's how she dealt with her losses. She turned to her family, to friends, her community, to mental health, to physical health, and to faith. Little by little and on her time, she recovered, gained perspective, and continues to lead a life full of joy and a better version of herself. It is my belief that tsunamis of life will touch all of us at some point. The very best parts of me have been born out of those trials. Let's make sure that the disappointment and pain that our friends are feeling because of the layoff are now going through is not suffered alone. Let's make sure that these cuts are not in vain, that they stoke a greater drive and ambition within. And most importantly, let's make sure that our response to this setback is worthy of the legacy we all envision of ourselves. Lastly, there we go. I have a massive painting that hangs in my entry by my favorite artist, Brian Krzyznik. It is both stunningly beautiful and somber, a representation of life's universal experience of wrestling with trials. The premise is rooted in the Old Testament. It's an allegorical depiction of Jacob wrestling with an angel. It's also deeply intertwined with a poem from the German poet Rilke, titled The Man Watching, which is a paradox of victory and defeat, and how life's defeats shape us into our best selves. So here's an excerpt from this poem, which, again, coincidentally, before these personal trials of having to go through, that hung so beautifully and still does in our entry. So let's read these two stanzas. What we choose to fight is so tiny. What fights us is so great. If only we let ourselves be dominated as things do by some immense storm, we would become strong too. Whoever was beaten by this angel went away proud, strengthened, and great from that harsh hand that kneaded him as if to change his shape. Winning does not tempt that man. This is how he grows, by being defeated decisively by constantly greater beings. This universal truth is also my truth. Victory doesn't shape us, rather defeat. As I mentioned previously, my strengths and my character have been formed by my setbacks and not by my victories. And it gives me great peace and hope that those that were impacted will be okay in a similar regard. Last part of this. Tomorrow we'll dive into the business. Tonight, I want to reassure you that Divvy is on incredibly stable ground. Our go-forward team is talented, dynamic, and tenacious. We have the right strategy and focus to not move an inch off of our vision. So please close out this day knowing that Divvy will also rise up as a better version of itself because of this setback and the collective pain we all feel. I know that to be true and will show you all starting tomorrow. So end quote from that. I don't need to say much else other than to reiterate what I told my team, that the trials, pain, and heartbreak we all inevitably experience will create the best version of ourselves if you'll allow it. And that is absolutely the biggest asterisk in that process, if you'll allow it. So when, not if, when you find yourself in the throes of despair, try to take a moment and ask yourself what you can learn and how you can grow. It may not be totally apparent in the moment, but I promise you, if you will allow yourself to be shaped by those trials, you will experience incredible personal growth. Oh, whatever. See, I always mess up technology. Literally, there's a 100% chance I'll mess it up. Like, 100%. Anyway, I want to thank you. Thanks for listening to some of my random thoughts. Hopefully, in your perspective, they came together. I hope more than just that, though, that you'll take me up on my offer. You know what this slide was supposed to be? It was kind of the last hurrah. It was the contact slide again. So hopefully you took a screenshot. My phone number is 480-280-1922. My email is blake@getdivvy.com. And it would be great to spend time with you. But here's kind of the last one. I would be lying to you. In this, I can sound like it has ego. It's not, the intent is not from an ego perspective. I would be lying to you if I said that we were surprised by the success of Divvy. None of us, those that were in the thick of it, were surprised by the success of Divvy at all. It was intentional. We executed ruthlessly and with very deliberate intent day in and day out. And that's why I want to meet with you, because my hope is that I can help you, again, eliminate some of the faulty thinking, and hopefully that I can add a little bit of wisdom into your own journey as you sacrifice and go about trying to find joy in your own journey. So thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity, and have a wonderful, wonderful year, because you know it's going to be a great year. Thank you so much.
All right, we do have a few minutes for questions. So we've got some people that are around the audience with microphones. So if you have a question, raise your hand, and I've asked Blake to stay up and take a few questions before you finish.
Yeah, so for those of you that also weren't a part of the Q&A, I only have one way of doing this, and it's by being brutally honest and totally transparent. So this is a choose your own adventure, and it's anything goes. I don't know where the microphone is, though, so somebody who's got the microphone, otherwise just shout it out if we're not concerned about that, and I can hear you.
Thank you, Blake, for such an amazing speech and talk. My name is Fiona. I am a 2011 MBA graduate, so I was invited to come back and remember every moment the staff faculties have done under Taylor's leadership. And I'm also extremely proud of all the progress we made. And when I was about to go to school, I think the U Business School was ranked about 50th, 56. It's just so amazing to see like the ranking continue to improve. So my question for you is, you talk about start with the end. And I'm not sure if it's really easy process for everyone to realize what their end goal is. What is the process you took to realize your end goal? And we all progress, change, learn, and
Yeah, so I would reject that. I do think it's relatively easy, and because you're not talking about a specific. I envision myself, 30 years from now in in this house and with having been a CEO for 12 years of this type of company. I'm not talking about the specifics. What I'm talking about is, again, this is after meeting with just countless individuals and talking about it's your inner aspiration of the lifestyle you hope to achieve in your life when it's all said and done. And perhaps that skews more towards philanthropy. Perhaps that skews towards the lifestyle, not even 30 years into it, is I want to be around my kids constantly. Like, I love sports and I want to teach or coach their sports teams, and I want to develop hobbies because I'm passionate about rock climbing or whatever it might be. It's those innate desires are built into you. That's what I'm talking about. Those, like, when you're sitting there and when you're talking with friends about, man, I love doing this. Those are built into you. Now, what I'm talking about then, career choices, is that if your expectation is to swing big or go big, you can't go find a job or a career that doesn't give you the potential to actually swing big. And I see that may be totally obvious. And perhaps I just wasted 24 minutes of people's time on that. But what I would suggest through experience is that most people do not understand that connection. So again, it's if I want to run a generational company, but I'm going to go I love writing and I'm going to be a copywriter, those don't align with each other. You have to put yourself in a position, and the ownership is yours, to figure out how to put yourself in a position to be a part of whatever growth story you want to be a part of. Let's kind of break that down one more point. And I can stay after and answer questions also outside of this forum. Let's say I want to become a tech executive, and that's important to me. You're not obviously going to start out, right, as a tech executive. But here's what you should do. You should be going through the websites of Y Combinator, YC, right, which is the best accelerator out there that finds, curates, and funds the best startups in the United States. You should go find the startups, but in the last 2 years that have raised, call it $30 to $50 million, and just go do whatever there. It doesn't matter. You just go get started there. Take literally the lowest job at the top performing company from those cohorts. All of that is published information, and just go get started. I would say you are on the right path that aligns with the big outcome that you would want at that point. It's not specific, but you're still along the right path that can lead, if you work your butt off. Like I said, the grit is good. If you work your butt off, it leads there. Inevitably, it does lead there. I've just seen it play over too many times.
thank you.
Couple more? Yeah.
Thank you, Blake. With your degree in environmental science, how did you learn the business world, the art and science of entrepreneurship, and learn how to recruit top talent so effectively?
So you had two questions there. The first one is, how did I learn business? I'm an obsessive researcher. And so and it's trying to learn from predecessors of those that have been there, done that. I'm not huge into reading business books. I spend, and this will probably get some big groans, an inordinate amount of time on Twitter. And if you curate a list on Twitter, literally just go follow the people I'm following on Twitter, of some of the best thought leaders, the level of transparency and execution transparency that they have about business is absolutely stunning. The other component of that is I just jumped right in. I was willing to go in kind of on the ground floor of some kind of silly companies, if I'm going to be honest, and just try to be a problem solver from the very beginning. This is kind of a loaded question because I do have strong feelings of it. There's the alarm. But when you are the new person at a job, there are simple hacks to be successful. And one of the simple hack is to give more than you take away. Think of it as deposits and withdrawals. I'm going to deposit a hell of a lot more energy of time. I'm going to take the burden off my boss's plate. I'm going to try to acutely understand what she's going through, and I'm going to take it off her plate. And so you can curate some of that early success, which then is a feedback loop of learning as well. So you have to jump into it. The other part of your question was what?
Top tier talent.
Top tier talent. Storytelling is important for anybody's job, especially as you get into leadership. And it's something that has naturally been, I would say, relatively easy for me. That's what recruiting is storytelling. But that's not enough. You have to align behind a vision, a mission, and a values that people can rally behind. The goal in recruiting or in building a healthy company culture is not just to tell people to do that. That's management, telling people what to do. Leadership is getting people to do what you want them to do, but because they want to do it. And they feel that energy and that burning fire and passion to go do it. And that comes through connecting dots behind the vision, mission, values, and really good storytelling.
We're going to go right here for our last question.
Hi, Blake. So I wanted to ask you, when you were first starting Divvy, or maybe earlier on in your career, I'm interested in, if you ever got to a point where you just felt doubt or you felt confusion.
Sure.
And I wanted to ask you, how did you navigate that, and how did you, recollect yourself and decide, okay, these are the next things I need to do in order to reach my end goal?
Well, so the short answer there is conviction. And it's specific to Divvy. I knew within the first 2 weeks that Divvy had the potential to be massive. Within the first 2 weeks of the idea, I started investing money and time into it. So then doubt creeps in along the way, but there was just such a clarity of thought, at least, and maybe it is unique to our situation, and perhaps it's not helpful, but we had such a clarity of thought that what we were creating was a no-brainer to get adopted by our target audience, that we would just find a way. We have a saying, my executive team kind of pokes fun at me, and frankly, growing up, my family always poked fun at me about it. But they used to say that Blake's right even when he's wrong. And that meant that no matter what, we would find a way. We have an irrational confidence in our ability to solve problems. So Divvy failed multiple times along the way. I mean, we were 48 hours away from our global launch, and our bank partner, the fourth largest bank in the United States, pulled the rug out from under us and eliminated the deal 48 hours before. And that was kind of the oh crap moment of all oh crap moments. You're forced to regroup. You look to your left and your right, the people that you care about that share the same conviction, because it's not just mine. They're living and breathing it as well. And then you wake up in the morning and you solve the problem. I don't know how else to answer it. That's part of grit. It's just you wake up and you go solve the problems.
Thanks, Blake.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Come on down if you want to talk.
So I just want to say thanks to Blake for his inspiring speech and his openness and transparency with us and willingness to work with our students. And it's great to see your family here. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you, Taylor, for everything you've done for the school, and congratulations again on a well-deserved recognition. And to the Eccles family, and in particular, our great friend Spence Eccles, thank you so much for everything you've done for our school.